Under this administration, authoritarianism has taken root in our country. I and my family, and many of yours, know the insidious way authoritarianism destroys democracy, decency, and humanity.
Joining us now, Republican political strategist and co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson. His book, Running Against the Devil, A Plot to Save America from Trump and Democrats from Themselves, is out today in paperback. Also with us, MSNBC national affairs analyst, co-host of Showtime's The Circus, and executive editor of The Recount, John Heilemann.
All
Good
right.
to have you guys.
You know, Twitter, I try to stay away from it as much as possible. But Rick Wilson last night, I laughed out loud. When I saw we go low, so you don't have to. The scrubbing bubbles of 2020. We work so you don't have to. But, you know, it reminded me how Republicans campaigning and Democrats campaigning do think differently. They just do. And you and I may have left the party, but the campaigning DNA is still in there. I saw all these people whining last night about this Miles Taylor guy endorsing Biden. Oh, we don't want him. No. I was reminded of what W.D. Childers said. You know, the Banty Rooster from Northwest Florida. I didn't agree with a lot of things that the Banty Rooster said, but one was this: I want all the money. And I want all the votes. And that's the idea. When you're in the campaign, you want all the money and you want all the votes and you want as big a tent as possible.
And you don't want to end up like WD's friends under a house, as making a Florida joke only you and I will get. But long story short, you know, this is always a game. This is always a game of addition. And the base of either party is insufficient to win in the Electoral College, so you've got to add people. You've got to bring folks in. I think they were trying really hard last night at the convention to show the faces, even though they're no longer in office, of Republicans who are breaking away from Trump. It doesn't have to be a lot. We call it the Bannon line. Steve Bannon said if 3 or 4% of Republicans walk away from Trump, the game's over. And he's not wrong. So I think we're in a situation where that you saw that last night highlighted a little bit. And that's a lot of the work what we're doing at the Lincoln Project as well.
Yeah, you know, John Heilemann, Donald Trump's campaign called John Kasich, a useful idiot or whatever for left-wing radicals. So, again, it's so bizarre. This is a guy, and I was there when he was doing it, who fought like hell against the Republican and Democratic establishment to balance the budget for the first time in a generation. And as budget chairman, he did it 4 years in a row. You know what other conservative has done that in the past century? Oh, wait, nobody. And Kasich had to be conservative and stare down not only liberal Democrats, but also powerful appropriators in his own party. Yeah. The guy's a conservative. Like only in this bizarre political world would anybody ever consider Kasich anything but a conservative. But it's a personality cult.
Well, yeah, and think about this, Joe. In that same press release they sent out last night attacking John Kasich, they also attacked Susan Molinari for being wait for that, now here we go, you're going to love this. They attacked Susan Molinari for being a Vladimir Putin puppet, a pal of Vladimir Putin. So, I mean, you think about pots and kettles and the color black. I was just stunned by that. So, you know, what are you going to say? Like, you know, it's the most ridiculous thing on earth. I think Donald Trump wouldn't know a Republican if one came up and bit him on the hindquarters. But, you know, again, as you said, we are where we are.
So, Rick, we're going to let John Heilemann close his blinds to the right there. He's getting a nice wash to the right side.
Seriously.
Rick, let's talk. Wow. Rick, let's talk about this campaign, because you have said that, of course, Donald Trump. There he goes. Yep, there you go. Turn it there, John. You said, of course, Donald Trump could win. We all know that. Of course, he can win. But you say Joe Biden could lose it. And you explain that by saying if he runs the campaign that Donald Trump and the Trump campaign wants him to run. So what do you mean by that? What is that campaign?
Well, Donald Trump knows this campaign right now is a referendum on him. It is a referendum on a man who has mismanaged a pandemic so badly that 170,000 of our fellow Americans have died. It's a man who's wrecked the economy by being an idiot on the front end of the pandemic and saying nothing's happening, it's not wrong, there's no problem. This is a question of a yes or no decision, decent man or indecent man, competent man or incompetent man. And if people are making that decision, they're going to know that Donald Trump is the incompetent, indecent, corrupt person in this race. If this is a race about socialism or policy, Donald Trump has a shot to recapture some of those Republicans who are walking away from the party right now because they fear things like socialism and they fear things, that a radical flip side version of Donald Trump. I don't think it's easy for them to get there right now because Trump has fallen so far and so fast. But this is a matter of sticking with this being a referendum about Donald Trump's leadership and the failures that he has caused and the pain he's caused this country.
And John Howman, Democrats did that last night. That was the first night, the beginning of their objective to remind people about Donald Trump's record, even just over the last few months. You had Bernie Sanders out front, bringing progressives back into the fold and saying we have to. It is critical. It is existential that we get behind Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We have disagreements with them on issues, but we have to get together with them. And then, of course, closing the night with Michelle Obama. From Democrats you've talked to, how do they think last night went as a kickoff to this week?
I think people are, Willie, very focused on the two things you mentioned at the end, which, of course, on the broadcast networks, which still have, a much bigger reach than this network and other cable networks, they only took an hour of the convention last night. They took that 10 to 11 o'clock hour. So the first hour, which some people thought was not maybe as wholly compelling. It was an attempt to do something no one's ever done before. It was the first attempt to do it. That first hour, I think they're still kind of figuring out how to make this thing seamless. The second hour was more like a traditional convention in that you had those two big speeches, and those are the ones that the broadcast networks took, and those were both very effective pieces of political communication for the work that needs to get done here. And what I think a lot of Democrats that I talk to and people inside the campaign are really focused on is having gotten that work done last night. Everyone expected Sanders and Michelle Obama to be very good. I think they are now focused over these next 3 days on really the most important work of this convention, as we have started to see some polls that have suggested a little bit of tightening over the last few days, and particularly the fact that Donald Trump continues to maintain this advantage on the economy, that they have important work to do these next 3 nights on telling people the story of Joe Biden. Everyone in America knows he was Barack Obama's vice president, but there's a lot of data out there that suggests that there's still a lot of his background that needs to be filled in, the story of who Joe Biden is, and trying to lay out that economic vision and trying to make up a little bit of that ground and get a little closer, if not overtake Donald Trump, at least get in a more competitive position with him on the economy. It is, according to the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, the most important issue to voters right now, who's best suited to rebuild the economy. And right now, Trump has a 10-point lead in that area. That's the thing that the Biden campaign is super focused on. And I think you're going to hear a lot of discussion both about Joe Biden's biography and about economics over the next 3 nights.
Rick Wilson, we can't say it's early anymore when we look at polls. We're starting actually to get into the final stretch. Early voting is going to be starting in the next couple of weeks in quite a few states. I think North Carolina is one of the first. We have a poll out of Wisconsin this morning that we've shown that shows Joe Biden up by 6 points. That's fairly consistent. You go to the crosstabs. Fairly consistent that you have suburban voters moving away from Donald Trump, seniors moving away from Donald Trump, educated voters moving away from Donald Trump. I'm just curious, though, are 6 points, is that still a little too close for comfort, not only in this poll, but also in polls that you see in Michigan, Arizona, North Carolina, and other swing states? Where are we? Where is this state of the race as far as you're concerned by all the numbers that you're looking at?
Joe, on the Electoral College likely voter polls, Biden has a meaningful but not sufficient advantage. And I think that it's important in the coming weeks that people focus in those states, they focus their resources, their communications efforts, their strategic efforts in those states to rev up the early voting, because this thing is going to start, as early voting starts in a very short window from now in most states. Donald Trump is going to try to roll out an August, September, and October surprise to drive down Democratic turnout. We're going to have to be ready for those things. The earlier people vote, the earlier people request their absentee ballot and get it back in, the better off we are, especially when he's playing shenanigans with the Postal Service and other things. And it's important to keep that energy level up in these states and to not take anything for granted. You cannot rest with Donald Trump. He is a feral animal, and he's trapped in a cage right now. He will do anything. He will lie, cheat, steal, suppress the vote. He will do all kinds of things to keep revving up his base, depressing Democratic turnout, and he will do the things that are feeding the monster that keeps the fundraising going for him. So you can expect a lot of white hot crazy coming at you really, really soon now from Donald Trump.
John Heilemann, what are we looking at tonight? What are we expecting at the DNC tonight?
Well, I think the highlight for people tonight, I think, Mika, is going to be the woman that you're going to have on the next morning, which is to say Wednesday or Thursday morning, Wednesday morning, I guess, right? Which is Dr. Jill Biden, who, to my point a second ago, you think about the two big pieces of business that this convention now has to do: telling Joe Biden's story, making him the acceptable alternative. They've made the case against Donald Trump now for months. They're still making it, but can Joe Biden be the acceptable alternative? A lot of that is biographical work, and no one knows Joe Biden better than Dr. Jill Biden. And so that speech takes on a lot of importance tonight on the biographical front. I think she's going to get a bunch of time to tell the story of their relationship and tell the story, the human story of Joe Biden, a lot of the stuff that has happened to him that makes him the character of empathy that is such a stark and appealing contrast to Donald Trump. We're going to hear the first part of that story told tonight by her, and that is, I guess they say, politically a very, very important piece of business they need to get done.
I really look forward to it. John Heilemann, we'll see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. And Rick Wilson, thank you very much. His book, Running Against the Devil, a plot to save America from Trump and Democrats from themselves. It's out today in paperback.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.